So you guys have a podcast.
Yes.
What's the name of your podcast?
Real Recovery Talk.
Okay, Real Recovery Talk. So there are 3 hosts. Tom is one of them.
And
he's a dear friend of yours.
Yep, Dr. Tambini.
Okay.
So it's a 3 of us, essentially. Started in 2017, and the idea behind it is that, here we are where we're running a center. We help all the addicts and alcoholics, but then what do you have? The helicopter moms. And it occurred to Tom, at least that's what he tells me, like, hey, who's getting them the information that they need? Everyone neglects the family, so to speak. So the podcast was born out of getting them the information and education and that they need, but it's evolved over the course of time. We have over 500 episodes at this point. So, obviously having people in recovery come on, people from the industry, different professionals, attorneys, doctors, you name it, across the gamut. Like at this point, we're like, oh, what are we going to podcast about today? It's like we're running out of topics. But the fact of the matter is, even if you've gone over a certain topic before, if you have a new guest on, it's a different spin on it, different perspective. So yeah, it's kind of like being in recovery, working with sponsees. It's the same 12 steps every time, but every single experience is unique.
Yeah, I love that. You're educating people, and especially when it comes to addiction, sobriety, and especially with the families. I know when I started struggling with oxys, opiates were my thing. My parents had no idea what was going on, what addiction was, how to help, whether they were enabling me, not enabling me, cutting me off, bringing me back in. They didn't know. And they loved me. They wanted to support me. But like these podcasts weren't around then. And like scouring the internet in 2013 to 2018, when they were constantly looking things up for me, or at least just doing the research on it, it wasn't readily, available online. Yeah. So kudos to you guys and for what you're doing, because you are helping a lot of people and you are making a splash in the recovery space, which I have a lot of passion for. So
no, it's really quite amazing. And the experiences for me have turned out to be more than I could ever ask for. For instance, just as a very simple example, yesterday I had a lady that had been listening to our podcast, and after listening for a long time decided to reach out about her husband. Now our we don't necessarily like try to drive people into our center based off our podcast. That's not why we created it in the first place.
Yeah.
It does happen organically. However, this was a situation where our center couldn't help the husband directly, but because of my contacts and being in the field for over 12 years now, I was able to get her husband into a reputable treatment center very quickly. And she actually jumped on the forum of Mind Pump and like basically gave kudos and sent me a text message just saying, even though you couldn't help through your center, you took time out of your day and because it took me a couple hours of investing time, checking the insurance, making sure in his situation physically, he's in a wheelchair currently because of his drinking. Yeah. So, jumping through those hoops of finding out where he can go. And, we don't benefit financially off that, but it's 12-step work in its own. I always tell people, for me, like having the podcast working in treatment is not my program. However, just to call it what it is.
Yeah, of course.
You occasionally, more than occasionally, get the same reward internally and here in your heart, Yeah.
Do you get commission for that if you refer them to another facility?
No, that would be client brokering.
That's exactly why I asked that question. And I think that's very important that people know. Body brokering. Yeah. The Florida Shuffle. It's a well-known thing down here in Florida, and it deters people from getting clean or sober, and it can cost someone their life, which is a sad thing.
Yeah, I went through all the brokering times. I worked in treatment at that point in time. Just continued to do the right thing, do the right thing, do the right thing. I'm seeing people that, good intentioned people, the money starts talking, get a little cash on the side. They end up going to jail, going to prison. And 12 years later, I'm still working in the field.
Yeah.
And doing the right thing always pays off. And again, it's that reward of, for me, I'm not the kind of guy that says like, hey, you don't have the money or insurance or the resources to benefit me. At the end of the day, I can't hang up on somebody, man. I've been I am that junkie. I cannot hang up the phone without giving my best effort to even indirectly help. Like, I can't help you directly. Let me find you a spot. Because part of what I do is knowing good people in the industry. Who is reputable? Who's running a good center? Are they clinically meeting all the criteria and above board, and being able to just get that feedback from somebody. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. Dude, the purpose and fulfillment, that's something that's what I was searching for, sticking a needle in my arm. That purpose is what it comes down to.
Well, that work where you're helping others, I mean, there's no coincidence that you have 14 years of sobriety today.
Yeah.
That's long-term sobriety. And when I feel like 5 years in sobriety, like before 5, if you have under 5 years, I mean, that's amazing. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not knocking anyone. I feel like for me, once I made it through my first 5 years, there were a lot of things. I was insane up until 5 years. And then after 5 years, that's when the real recovery started to happen for me. And then like you have no choice but to help others if you want to stay clean and sober. So this show is sponsored by Open Recovery Addiction Help. Whether you're newly sober, in long-term sobriety, or even maybe looking to make a change in your life, Open Recovery offers 24/7 support right from your phone. It's anonymous and packed with tools to help you stay connected, stay accountable, and build the life you deserve. Download the Open Recovery Addiction Help app today and take the next step in your recovery journey.
Best kept secret in recovery, the 12-step.
Yeah.
And let me throw this out there for the listeners. People ask me all the time, like, how I've stayed sober long-term. Like, parents will ask me all the time, how did you do it? In the beginning, if I'm honest with you, I have no idea. God's grace. Like, it's a freaking miracle. However, I can sit here right now and tell you that there has never been a time in my 14 years of sobriety where I haven't had a sponsee actively going through 12 steps with me. That is one consistent thing that I've never let up on. Usually I have two. With the way that my life is today, I got 2 kids. Like, I was all in the beginning. I'd have 5, 6 sponsees and the door would be rotating.
Yeah.
They probably thought I was a crack dealer, people coming in and out, but if I have to throw something out there, that's the one thing that I've never let up on and I never will let up on.
Yeah. Well, it's esteemable acts as well. If I'm not helping someone, if I'm not busy with work or something, I'm in my head and I start thinking. And once I start thinking, for any alcoholic addict, I don't care how long you are sober, it's not a good place to be.
No. My sponsor told me best way to get out of your shit is to jump into somebody else's.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to curse? Sorry.
Yeah. No. You can. Absolutely. You really want to emphasize that.
Yeah. Best way to get out of your shit is to jump into somebody else's. Mm-hmm. And if I think about it, if I'm having a bad day, for whatever reason, as soon as I'm sitting down and somebody else is telling me about their bad day, I go to how do I help this person with the solution? And if I take a second and think about myself in that moment, I have complete peace. All those problems that I stepped into going to meet with that sponsee or whatever the case is, gone, literally gone. And let me throw this out there too. I don't show, like, I know I have to meet up with the sponsee. Probably 90% of the time, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? It's Friday night. I could be doing X, Y, Z. And the second I sit down with them, something changes. And that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm Ben, the selfish, self-centered alcoholic junkie, dude. So there's something magical to service, without a doubt.
So Ben, where are you from originally and what was early childhood like for you?
Born and raised in South Florida. So born in Fort Lauderdale, but I grew up in the, let's just say Jupiter area, Jupiter, Palm Beach Gardens. Funny thing, I'll mention this. I was telling Tom as we pulled in here together, parking in that garage right there in here in Abacoa, I've got some really bad memories here. I was telling him I've got a pit in my stomach just being in this neighborhood. Did a lot of drinking, a lot of cocaine and pain pills, and probably some of the most mortifying times of my drunkenness were in this neighborhood. the stuff where you're like, oh, you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my God, I hope nobody saw that. You know,
you're like the fifth guest who has said that about parking in that garage over there. Mm-hmm. It brings back bad memories.
Yeah.
And then they come in here and relive them. No, but so were your parents around? What was childhood like?
So I grew up in a good home. You know, my mom was very involved with us kids, like made sure I got to a lot of opportunities as far as sports, I was always in public schools, but good public schools. My dad was an electrical engineer. He retired from FPL 30 years. I never wanted for anything, you know, and basically one of the things that I'll always give them credit for is they still, you know, brought me up to have a work ethic and discipline, etc. So from that perspective, like my parents were amazing. Kind of one thing that I think I'll organically jump into, I do have some very significant childhood trauma. I'm a very open book. I guess I'll just kind of jump into it because you're probably left here guessing. Opportunities, and I've shared with this on our podcast, I got very open in detail probably a year and a half ago, which is the first time I've really come out on a venue like that. I've helped people on an individual level, and I still hate talking about it today. But at 10 years old, going back to my mom and dad provided me with a lot of opportunities. MacArthur State Park, that's over here on Singer Island, they did a snorkeling camp during the summers. I attended this snorkeling camp, like marine biology, snorkeling. I grew up surfing. I love the ocean. There was a counselor there that kind of just elevator version took me under his wing, got the trust of my mother, and turned out, to give the long story short, I found out on the back end that this man had previously lived in Ohio, came down to Florida. Prior to having the sex offender registry, he had been charged with 27 counts of sexual battery on children. But he did his time up there. There was no sex offender registry at the time. I don't think it came into to be until 91, 92, something like that. And this was in, I want to say 95. But for a good probably, I've tried to piece the time in my head as I've tried to go over it for myself. Probably a good 6 to 8 months of some very significant sexual trauma by a over 40-year-old man. I mean, just to put it very bluntly, those were my first sexual experiences. And really, this is a podcast about addiction. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's what made me a drug addict and alcoholic. I am a believer in the mental obsession, physical allergy. And, you know, when I picked up a drink and I have that phenomenon of craving, et cetera. But I will say this, that trauma definitely forged a huge part of my mental decline and the attitude that I moved forward with to not caring about myself whatsoever. I mean, just to call it what it is, without people knowing, you know, going into middle school, because this was the summer going into 6th grade. I went into middle school, the most insecure, scared person on the face of the planet, man. I hated myself. By the time I was a freshman in high school, you know, things had gotten pretty bad for my mental health. I'll just throw it out there. A lot of suicidal ideation, severe suicidal ideation. Part of that, like to the point where at the time, SSRIs, my Paxil was a newer SSRI. I got put on that. Now it's nicknamed Pax Kills, and they don't really use it anymore. But it turns out you're not supposed to give it to adolescents. The studies come out later, causes suicidal ideation. So that on top of it just compounded. I could tell you this, by the time I was a junior in high school, I had a severe drug addiction. And I'll say this, thank God for drugs and alcohol. They saved my life. If I didn't have that at the time, there's pretty much no doubt in my mind I would have killed myself. I hated myself internally that much. And I mean, to just kind of give a little snapshot, you know, of what that looked like. I generally don't get too deep into it because it, you know, a lot of it looks the same for everybody. But growing up down here in South Florida, the rave scene was huge. Back, you know, at the age where my friends started having cars was around 1999. I graduated high school in 2002, barely. Got heavy in the rave scene, every drug that comes along with that. First time using heroin, 16. Did the whole doctor shopping thing down here. I mean, I remember when Oxycontin first came around here, and I remember it like being a thing. I was about 15 years old, and you know, I remember being able to get a 40 milligram oxy for $6. You know, it was like super cheap. So, and, you know, dabbled with the heroin, but just to call it what it is, the pills were easier to get. And so you talk ecstasy, GHB, became a bartender, a lot of cocaine use. I used to bartend up off of PGA Military there. There used to be a bar called Abbey Road. Started as a food runner there, but essentially did just about every drug under the face of the sun. My opiates ended up being my drug of choice, IV opiates, but anything I could get into a needle at one point was how I was going. So, but that's kind of the snapshot of the evolution of what that looked like. It took off really quick for me. And I'll say a lot of that came from the insecurity of that trauma. And I always had in my mind that everybody else was better than, they had done something that I hadn't done. In my mind, honestly, and it was totally fictitious. I see that today. But like, if I heard that some other kid did ecstasy, I'm like, well, I won't sound cool if I haven't done it. But then it turns out that I'm really the only one doing it, you know, and come to find out, like, if you talk to the kids I was friends with in high school, they look back now and they're like, Ben, you were the crazy one. But in my mind, I was just trying to keep up with the reputation of everybody else. Completely delusional.
What was the relationship like with your family during this crazy time in high school? And then when you started to do heroin at 16, and also did you resent your parents because they had built trust with that camp counselor?
Very good question. So I want to I'll be very honest about this and the recovery side of me, working a program. Let me preface by saying my mom and dad were excellent parents. We all do the best that we can. I will sit here and admit that one of the resentments that still crops up today is exactly that. Again, my mom and dad were there for everything. They showed up. They made one major mistake in my life that affected me, and that was that. As far as my relationship with them during my drug and alcohol use, they didn't know about it at the time. And so it's funny, I brought up this neighborhood and parking in that garage. I believe when I was about 19 years old, I went on a pretty good crack run at some point. It started off at this bar, Jumbie Bay here, drinking, went on a nice crack run, Xanax, Oxys, the whole nine. My mom ended up picking me up off the side of the road somewhere. I don't recall exactly where I was, in the Abacoa, Donald Ross area somewhere. But it was the first time I had said something. I was high as a kite, super resentful. She's like, Ben, why do you keep doing this? And I'm, oh, you want to know why I do it? I weaponized my trauma. That was the first time I took that trauma and threw it in her face. And I was like, I'm like this because of what you did. You put me in a situation where I had this sexual trauma in my life, and you're taking the blame. All out war at that point on them. My intention was to make them hurt the way that I hurt. And I say that shamefully today because they didn't deserve that. My dad was very much, because they didn't know that information until then, my dad was the type, dude, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. The first time they dropped me off at a treatment center, you know, my dad was like, this is not my son. He was so ashamed. I remember the look in his face. Like his look disowned me. I could feel it. Just so much disappointment. Because in their mind, they didn't know about this. They had provided everything as great parents. So where did they go wrong? Now, essentially, come to find out, after I brought that up to my mom, again, I was high. So it came up later, maybe months, maybe a year or two later. Timelines are hard to keep track of when all that chaos is going on. But it had come up again somehow in discussion. And she said, you know what, Ben, I got to tell you something. I had heard through rumor that guy had actually been accused of that. I think she said 6 other children involved with that camp. And I just thought it was all rumor, and he never actually got charged with anything. So I never said anything. She was like, I kind of suspected, but I never brought it up to you because you never brought it up to me, is the way that I interpreted it.
Yeah. And
it was actually in my sobriety that I went back, that I mentioned the 27, he was charged with 27 counts of sexual battery on children in Ohio. That information was actually locked because there was the lawsuit with Boy Scouts of America. He was a Boy Scout leader in Ohio. And I guess when the federal government got involved, they had to release all that information. So in my sobriety, seeking relief and recovery from my trauma, I started deep diving for myself, got on Google one day, and all of a sudden the stuff that wasn't on Google was on Google. And I was like, because I said to myself, because my mom was like denying, she's like, no, nothing ever really happened. And now I had my proof. I'm like, here's the articles. I actually have them on my phone saved. And the reason that I keep them on my phone saved is so that I can show clients, sponsees, anybody that comes up. I'm an open book with them. Hey man, you're not alone. But
sorry, just to clarify for the listeners, Ben is saying that he keeps them on his phone because if there is a newcomer that comes into the program that you're trying to help and is ashamed of a sexual abuse experience that they've had, you have that proof to show them that they are not alone. Just to clarify that. Yeah. Exactly. That's amazing that you do that, by the way.
It's funny the way that this works, because throughout my entire addiction, I've suffered just about every consequence there is, from overdoses to twice Jupiter Hospital, back-to-back weeks, same doctor twice. I joke about it. I have rewards points at every psych ward on 45th Street. If it went under new management, I'm like, bro, under new management, better try it out, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been Baker acted in the state of Florida. It kept me out of jail quite a few times though, too.
Yeah.
But where was I going with this? It's funny how it works, because from my addiction, and anybody that works a good program that's in recovery knows this, what was once a liability, our story, can now be an asset. And that even goes for my sexual trauma. And I'll throw this out there. I'm currently just started doing EMDR for it. And here I am 14 years sober. But I had found something that got me to the point, and this was actually through 12 steps. I believe 12 steps can help with just about everything. Not everything, but very close. Through work in 12 steps, I came to the realization of I can use my sexual trauma to help somebody else. Therefore, that guy that had control over me beyond the event itself all the way through, he held me hostage for years. I allowed him to. Now, that liability has become an asset. And guess what? I control the narrative. I'm telling the story. You may have done that to me, but now I'm the one in control. And it goes back to addicts and control. Like, I think I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my case, I perceive trauma as a lot of times as a lack of control. Whatever the situation was out of your hands a lot of times, and you can't go back. You can't change it. It's a lack of control. So essentially, through working 12 steps and taking it as a service, I'm now experiencing control. I'm now using it for good. I get to decide what I do with that. And that's been a big part of my healing. It got me really far, but I have made the decision to get EMDR at this point, which is eye movement desensitization. What is it, Tom? And reprocessing. Yeah. So just because you had brought up, you had asked earlier, was there resentment there? 14 years of sobriety, occasionally when my mom annoys me a little bit, that resentment pops up.
Yeah.
And this is a process. It's not there all the time anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of relief from it. In fact, I'll go as far to say a lot of freedom from it, not just relief. But yeah, I still got to work on it on occasion because I'm still that guy. I'm still that addict, selfish and self-centered. This happened to me. I'm going to weaponize it on you.
Did that guy go to prison?
I do not know what happened to him at this point.
Uh-huh.
At one point in my sobriety, went up to Minnesota for 4 years to try to get sober. Everyone in Florida was done with me. It was end of the road down here, nowhere else to go. I actually got released from a psych ward once again, straight to the airport in Fort Lauderdale, on a plane to Minnesota, which I ended up worse than ever in Minneapolis as far as opiates go. Most physically addicted I've ever been in my life was up there. But what was the question again?
Did the guy go away to prison?
Oh, yeah. Did he go? So I'm unsure. I got sober. I did not stay sober in Minnesota. I came back down here. I think within my first year of sobriety, which I got sober in Florida, basically.
So 27 to 28 years old.
Yeah.
You got sober at 27.
Yes.
Okay. So you're 28, a year into your sobriety.
Yeah. And I went to South Florida Fair and I saw the guy for the first time. And that is the last I've heard or seen of him beyond looking for those articles and Google searching the stuff. I have no idea. I know he's still around, still lives in the same place through my Google search stuff. But I've always asked myself, what would I do with that anyway? Mm-hmm. And I'll admit this too. At this point, I'm a grown man. I'm not 10 years old anymore. When I saw him, it scared the hell out of me. I'm not afraid to admit that. It sucks to say it out loud, but I don't have the fear. Like it's one of those situations where it gave me this visceral response. I saw him and I felt 10 years old again. But I was so caught off guard. At this point, if I saw him ever again, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
I would probably pray that I would do this, actually the same thing that I did, and just walk away and leave it be. Because what good would have come? I go kill the guy?
Yeah.
Like,
now you're going to prison for life.
I got kids to take care of. I have more responsibility today than to get even.
Yeah.
You know?
Were you able to find forgiveness?
You know, it's funny you asked that question because this is with my parents, yes. With him, I don't know necessarily that I forgive him as an individual, but you know what I find interesting, and this I'm just letting you into my psyche, and some people might be like, dude, that's sick. I found myself, like, for instance, on YouTube, watching some of the stories about the sex offenders that go out, they get put out in Belle Glade because they can't live anywhere and stuff like that. And there's a part of me that feels, I don't know, the empathy is the right word, but look at the stuff that I did in my addiction. Mm-hmm. Someone else just had, I don't know what pedophilia, what you would call, is it an addiction? I don't know. I don't care to find out or figure it out. Mm-hmm. But there is a part of me that says to myself, just like the big book says, this is a sick man. You know, and so many people gave me grace. To answer your question as far as the forgiveness, him, I can't answer either way. Mm-hmm. But I do know that I can take, like the big book says, not kindly. I'll scrap that one out. That's what the big book says. Not kind, but I could take a tolerant view of him. Mm. And that's progress.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I could tell you when I was out on my crack binges, I was like, I'm going to find him. I'm going to kick his door down and chop his head off with a machete with no remorse, you know, but you can't live like that.
Look, I have not had that experience, so I can't speak about as to what I would do in the situation, but I can say I respect you for where you're at with the situation. And even I appreciate you sharing it, and I know why you're sharing it. It's to help the person who is listening to this show right now who is in, addiction or just in a horrible place in their life, and they don't think that anyone else can relate to what they're feeling like or that experience that they experienced.
It also, too, lowered the bar where, as far as I had seen it, that was my first sexual experience ever. I'll throw this out there. I ended up doing things to get my fix when I was dope sick, to be able to attain drugs, that because I didn't care. It had already been taken from me is the way that I saw it. So that my line as far as principles and values and valuing myself got drastically lowered. And to get my fix, I would do whatever it took. Whether that meant hurting myself, hurting somebody else, emotionally, physically, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So I'm not making an excuse, but I do have an understanding why in active addiction people crossing the lines that they do.
Yeah. Now, I know we jumped around a little bit, but can you take us through what it was like your last year using? So let's say 26 to 27 years old, and then ultimately how you ended up getting clean and sober.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, I was up in Minnesota. I was in the psych ward down here. Went up to Minnesota. Down here, I had the pill mills. I done heroin down here. I get up there, and this is about a year after I got there, the heroin epidemic took off. Minneapolis, on record from the DEA, had the purest heroin in the U.S. at that time. Just go figure. You put me from Florida where the heroin sucks, that we had oxys and stuff. You put me in Minneapolis that has the purest heroin in the U.S. at the time, and I'm right off to the races. Long story short, you said the last year, but I think I can I'll go back a little bit more in time because some significant stuff happened that I think is important to mention. I had gotten up there, and my idea in my head is I'm getting on this airplane. Here's something beautiful. No one in Minnesota knows who I am. I can go up there and present whoever I want to be, and no one's going to know the difference. They have this thing called Rule 25 up in Minnesota at the time. I don't know if they still have it, but the state had a fund to help people go to treatment. And they actually paid for private treatment centers. So I went up there with no insurance. You had to be a resident for a year. My nice little grandmother that lives up there, that's how I ended up there. She was up there, brought me into the Wright County Human Services building, talked to the social worker. She's like, my grandson's going to die. I had track marks, black and blue up my arm. Everyone up there was meth and alcohol. I go to this treatment center. I'm the only heroin opiate addict. So I dabbled for that first year, went back to drinking, crack. You're in an M state, so you might as well do meth. And I'll tell you this, you start doing meth, you attract attention to yourself real quick. You do some weird shit on meth. It's like, here I am, come get me. I end up meeting a young lady. Her name's Whitney, mother of my child. I'll throw this out there, that bar gets lowered. I remember when she got pregnant. We met in the bar. I was back to bartending, and I was personal training at this point. Bartending, personal training. Those were my go-tos. I end up meeting her. She gets pregnant. Her dad had just passed from cancer, so she had access to his oxys. And essentially, I met the only opiate addict up there. I'm like, hey, we're definitely a thing. We got that in common, right? I mentioned earlier, everyone's alcohol and meth up there. She gets pregnant, and this thought comes across, thank God she's pregnant. Now I can be sober. Like what human being needs a better reason? That I didn't realize the grip, once again, for the millionth time, the grip that addiction had on me. I'm ashamed to say it, but we used through her entire pregnancy. IV heroin through the whole thing. The week our son Weston was born, he was born healthy by the grace of God. She had quit using 10 days before giving birth so that in the hospital they wouldn't take him. I don't know how she did it. She just cold turkeyed. She had gone to treatment while she was pregnant for a small stint. But we end up having him. He's 3 weeks old, walked right out the front door by the police and her family. We couldn't keep a newborn for more than 3 weeks before losing custody of him. First thing I do, go get high once again. And I ended up in detox shortly after that. It didn't end there. You know, we had got him back temporarily, lost custody again. But you had asked what the last year looked like. I ended up going to a center and I got on methadone. In particular, there's a type of, it's not actually methadone. It says in parentheses on the bottle methadone, but there's a type of methadone called LAM, LAAM. I forget the chemical. If you Google it, it's actually more physically addicting than regular methadone. It has intentionally a 48-hour half-life versus the 24-hour half-life. So in theory, you only have to go to the methadone clinic once or 2 to 3 times a week. Well, this clinic had you go every day anyway. So I ended up on 115 milligrams over the course of time. However, if you do the math, pretty much every day you dose, you still have half the dose in your body from the previous day. So my tolerance, because of methadone, went through the roof. And it was suggested to me to get on methadone by a detox that I went to. I was completely detoxed and still went to that methadone program. They told my mother, your kid's going to die if he doesn't get on methadone. It was actually an abstinence-based program. And they said, your kid is something else. Put him on methadone. Just keep him alive. But I had actually, being the good addict that I am, manipulated the system. And it was like a 40-minute drive to the methadone clinic. When it kicked off, I was unemployed. I still had a vehicle. But I got them to write me an exemption letter. The therapist wrote me an exemption letter to put me on take-homes right away because it was a hardship. So the only drug test I ever passed was the very first one in a year and a half. And for some reason, they didn't drug test me for the first year and a half being on this methadone program. So I'm getting take-homes from the get-go. I only had to go 3 times a week. But essentially what I did is I'm like, ooh, each one of these bottles is 12 shots in a syringe. So every day I went to the methadone clinic, I knew I could stick a needle in my arm 12 times for that day. On top of the heroin, my tolerance was so high because of the methadone that like the heroin, essentially, I just looked for the rush. So I had to do like extra large shots of heroin. And it was just, I mean, it was like the equivalent of doing crack. It lasted like a minute because my tolerance was so high from the methadone. But where I'm going with this is the physical addiction that I had to the methadone and heroin is what brought me to my knees. It got to the point where I just couldn't live a life, man. They call it liquid handcuffs. And it just dawned on me, I can't go on vacation. I can't get a normal job. Finally, they drug tested me, so they started making me go to the clinic every day. And I'm just like, I remember one day I slammed that methadone down in front of them and it spilled all over. And the lady's like, you can't do that. I'm like, I'm done. 2 days later, I'm in the hospital from withdrawal. I'm pretty confident I nearly had a heart attack. My poor grandmother threw me in her car. I collapsed in her driveway, puking. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. And you know, opiate withdrawal is not supposed to kill you. My body was so stressed out. I'm pretty confident, like I was on the verge of death.
How long did that detox last?
So they brought me to the hospital and all we can do is give you methadone. They gave me like 70 milligrams of methadone just to make me feel better. But I did go back to the methadone clinic and started tapering myself. 5 milligrams every 10 days, I think they allowed or something like that. I got it low enough. My sobriety date's December 8, 2010. I was not a drug dealer by any means. I was too selfish to be a drug dealer. If I had excess, I was doing it.
Of course.
It was not for sale.
I was never a successful drug dealer, ever.
But Whitney and I, we went down to Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis. For sake of the conversation, we'll call it Minneapolis. And we were meeting my dealer and we walk into this hotel, dude. I hadn't got to get high that day. And my methadone dose was low enough at this point. It was a snowy day. It's December in Minnesota. The sliding doors of the hotel lobby open up and there was probably a dozen DEA agents. And I'm like, oh, my heart drops. I had at least an 8-ball of heroin in my pocket, syringes. You know, Whitney had her hoodie on with her syringes, a small bag. But a miracle happened that day. Absolute miracle. We essentially walked into this situation. They had been following me around, and I had picked up on it a ways back. I'm like, well, that's strange. I just pulled into an empty parking lot to put the needle in my arm, and some random truck like parks in this empty, snowy parking lot. I was onto it a few weeks before, but you just don't care until it became a reality that day. But essentially what they didn't expect was to catch my guy that I was picking up from. They never really wanted me. They just knew that I knew the right people to get the stuff from. The people that I associated myself with, I'll leave out of this conversation. But they wanted them, without a doubt. And I'm sitting in the back of the car like, dude, I'm done. They've been following me. And that they were giving me a hard time. They're like, dude, we've been following you around. We know your license plate, this, that. We know you work at this gym and you're in that town and what your schedule looks like driving city to city every day. About an hour goes by and Whitney and I are separated. The part of the story I didn't tell you about her dad who passed from cancer, he was a Minneapolis cop for, I believe, 23 years. It just so happened one of the police officers from Minneapolis was there, saw her ID and said, wait, are you Lance's kid? She's like, yeah. He went to these DEA guys and said, can you please let these two kids go? This was a day before my son's first birthday. His birthday is December 9th. And that guy walks up to the car. He's like, do you want to go home today? And he had already basically explained to me, he needed me to show him all the different places where the big guys could be busted. And I just refused. I'm like, dude, if I do that, I'm dead. Like, someone's going to get me. So I thought he was like trying to butter me up. And he's like, no, I'm serious. You want to go home today? And he explained what happened. And he's like, I don't ever want to see you in Minneapolis, better yet, Minnesota again. Call me at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning so that I can make sure that you're on your way out of this state. And the next morning comes around. It's 8 a.m. I'm like, you know what? I'll give him 1 extra minute to sit down at his desk. 8:01, my phone rings. And I literally already had my phone in my hand ready to dial him. And he gets on the phone. He says, Ben, I told you to call me at 8 a.m. It's 8:01. I wanted you to know I wasn't messing around. Don't ever let me see you again. And you're on your way out of this state. And we just so happened to get our tax return. Because one thing I was always good at was having a work ethic. Somehow I always held on to my bartender jobs, my personal. It didn't look pretty, but I pulled it off. We hauled butt down to Florida. It was no detox, sick as hell. And I get down to this area once again in Florida and show up to the Oasis Club, the AA 12-step club, because I don't know where else to go. I had no resources. I had nothing. My parents were like, you can stay with us for a little bit, but that's only because I now had Whitney and I had Weston, our son, with me. Like, the situation was different. And my parents were very clear. They're like, we don't care about you. You have a 1-year-old. He's our priority. You're just lucky right this second. My parents got their black belts in Al-Anon at this point, which was a nightmare for me. But I end up showing up to Oasis Club, and I don't know what was different this time. But I was done. Despite all the consequences I had ever been through, it was just different.
What did you do your first 90 days this time in sobriety when you got back into Florida?
Honestly, worked a lot. My schedule was so busy. I got a job at a moving company off of Southwest 10th, which it was a 57-mile one-way drive to work every day.
Oh my God.
So essentially I would be getting up, and I had to be there at 7 a.m. I think it was. So I'd be up super early to beat traffic. I'd stop at LA Fitness in Boca on the way down to beat the traffic, like get a workout that way I wouldn't get stuck. Get a quick workout, hit there. You know, I got a sponsor, work 12 steps, Got 2 years sobriety, started going to school for addictions, and I was grinding. That work ethic that I had to get high, I applied to not getting high. I mean, I'll just call it what it is. If any, I know people run like I do. There's junkies out there built just like me.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of effort that I put into getting high, I was now putting into getting stuff. Some people say, oh, if you just put half the effort. No, not me. I got to put all the effort in. Staying sober the first 2 years was not easy.
If you had, so you're 14 years in sobriety now, and you've had a lot of time to think about it. If you could pick one thing that was different this last time that kept you in the game of sobriety, kept you going to meetings, what was it?
I'm going to answer honestly and still say I don't know the answer to that. I'll tell you this. 2020 hindsight, because you mentioned with 14 years of sobriety. Once in a while, you'll walk into a 12-step room and you'll hear people say it. There'll be a sign up on the wall that says, don't quit before the miracle. My sponsor pointed something out to me about the 12th step. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And here's the thing. If you're anything like me, I mean, there was days I was sticking a needle in my arm 50 times a day at the end. If you're anything like me and you haven't put a drink or a drug in your body for 24 hours, you're not hanging on or before the miracle happens. The miracle already occurred. The step work wakes you up to what's already happened. God had already intervened. December 8, 2010, God showed up. It said DEA. But God had intervened. Everyone was done with me. I can't give an answer other than God's grace. And I'm not a religious man. I'm not here and I'm one of those spirit of the universe guys. I'm not like overkill on the God thing, but I can sit here and tell you something divine stepped into my life. I have no other explanation. It still doesn't make sense.
Has your relationship with your God gotten stronger over the past 14 years?
Yes, and I could tell you the absolute proof to that one. I thought God, if there was a God, had absolutely abandoned or cursed me. God certainly hadn't done anything for me. Look at the trauma I've been through. Look at the damage in my life. I got nothing left. In August of 2019, and I was slow on the God thing. I found God through sponsoring other guys, but I'm going somewhere with this right now. Where in August of 2019, I did an intervention for a guy that I was familiar with. I got him into a treatment center. He was on Suboxone, so he couldn't come to our treatment center. I got him into a different one. While he was in his 30th day of PHP, he called me up on a Friday at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, Ben, my wife overdosed and died in Daytona. I need a ride up there. My 17-month-old was locked in our trailer with her for over half a day. Can you give me a ride to Daytona? I'm like, yeah, I'll give you a ride to Daytona. In my head, I'm driving up to Daytona Beach just to drop this guy, turn around, and come back. We get up there. What I didn't realize at the time is DCF already had an open case against him. I guess they were like going to the swimming pool and leaving Kai, was the 17-month-old, in the trailer, stuff like that. Drug use, alcoholism, everything that a DCF case would be open for. So they won't give Kai over to dad. And I'm sitting there like, well, I thought I was just turning around and going back, but now I'm standing around this place. They take her body out of the trailer when we show up. Like it was, I have pictures of this on my phone and it brings me to tears to look at every single time to see the conditions that Kai was in. I mean, there was like nails and bolts coming up through the floor of the RV that he was living in. There was syringes everywhere. I checked looked around for like food. There was 7 sippy cups. Every one of them was cottage cheese inside. Like there was one Uncrustable in the freezer. That's all the food that was in there. So we're sitting around this trailer park, and essentially DCF's like, well, we can't release Kai to you. And so we're just sitting around waiting to see what's happening. And I asked them, I'm like, hey, is there anything I can do to help? They don't know me, right? Like, they didn't know at the time I had, 10 years sober, whatever the math is. And essentially what ended up happening over the course of hours, we're still sitting there, and DCF can't figure out what to do because they didn't have enough foster parents registered in Volusia County. Daytona Beach area is not got a lot of resources to call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's a hurting county. And they basically explained, we're trying to look for a holding facility for Kai. Right now, he'll probably be in a holding facility for about 90 days so we can find somewhere for him to go. At this point, it's like midnight. We're getting chewed up by mosquitoes. I'm about to throw in the towel and just, hey, man, this is your problem, drive off. Something, I don't know why I did it. I walk up to the DCF lady one more time. They're standing at a picnic table. They're still baffled. I'm like, are you sure there's nothing I can do? I could show you my bank account. I can watch him for a week or two. And they end up, the lady says, no, there's a process to this. You'd have to it starts with a level 2 background check. And I'm like, I work in treatment. I'm a mandated reporter. I have a level 2 background check on file in West Palm Beach. She looks at me because I guess she assumed you're with this guy. You're probably trouble too.
Yeah. Not
realizing I had significant sobriety time. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. They wrote an emergency order way outside their normal procedure and allowed me to take custody of both Kai and Dad. I had to stay up there in Daytona. Where I'm going with this, I ended up getting the case transferred down, and I took in Kai temporarily. Whitney and I were together at this point in time. So it was kind of like getting a new dog. You just show up at home, but it's a kid. It's like, hey, Whitney, this is Kai. He's going to stay here for a little bit. The dad couldn't stay out of jail. A bunch of series of events, more use. Kai ended up being with us for about 2 years in our home, DCF case. And just, it got to the point one day, all of a sudden I get a phone call from DCF. Hey, man, Dad's giving up his rights. Sorry, man. It's years, dude. He's lived with you for 2 years. Do you want to adopt him? You asked me about the connection with God, I believe. If you stay in recovery long enough, work a program, live your life by certain principles, everything that I went through, I had a punishing God. Everything that I went through put me on the trajectory to be at that park that day. I was a guy who got my kid taken away by CPS in Minnesota. And now the state of Florida is calling me to say, will you adopt this kid? And we were able to adopt him on his 4th birthday. If God doesn't have a sense of humor, that was God telling me, Ben, there was a plan all along. I truly believe that in my heart. I would not have been there if I wasn't the junkie that I am. I wouldn't be working in the field. I wouldn't be an interventionist, none of that. Today, I have 2 beautiful kids, man. Weston's 15. Kai just turned 7. Kai's a freaking handful. But he's amazing. I mean, dude, I'll sum it up like this. I came to the realization, God said, Ben, congratulations. You got a free purpose card. You are a junkie. Do something with it. If you're an alcoholic addict, man, today, maybe you're new in recovery if you're listening to this, and you might be the same thoughts I had, this is a curse. I can sit here today and tell you, I now understand why that annoying old timer sat in meetings and said, I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. I always wanted to punch him in the face. Today, I realize that being an alcoholic and an addict is a gift because I crossed that line and got to come out that other side. And again, I'm not a religious guy, but you can't tell me that God or something divine wasn't involved in this whole thing. And it all makes sense today.
It's a beautiful story, man.
I don't even know what to say after that.
It's a beautiful story, and it's crazy how God brings things full circle for us, especially in recovery. You know, at one point you were unable to hold on to your first child because you were using, and how you were able to show up for someone else, and someone else being Kai, the kid. Yeah. And do you know how the father's doing now?
He's got a couple of years of sobriety, married. We stay in touch. And in fact, he came and visited me, and we hung out at the pool with Kai a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, Dad, being a savage junkie, when he's sober, is one of the most intelligent, driven, motivated people I've ever met on the face of the planet.
It's funny how that works.
It is wild. Mm. He's the kind of guy that with 2 years of sobriety starts his own company, has, I think, 12 employees under him. 2 years. Addicts and alcoholics tend to be some of the most gifted people you will ever meet in your entire life. Mm.
How is your relationship with your parents today?
Whew. You know, my mom and dad are still heavily involved in Al-Anon for themselves. They went for me and stayed for them. It's kind of funny because you know how I mentioned that my dad, he looked at me and, you know, in that look, disowned me.
Get your shit together.
Yeah.
The tough love. Yeah.
My mom goes out of town. He shows up to Al-Anon by himself. I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like, dork.
There is a God.
But I don't think too much needs to be said between my parents and I to feel. There's been moments where my dad in particular had said, man, I'm proud of you. Mm. God, what little boy, even me today at 41 years old, I'll call myself a little boy in that respect, doesn't want to hear from Dad. I'm proud of you. And my mom, as far as having the podcast, I've asked her if she ever wanted to come on. And she says to me, Ben, I prefer not to. I lived it. I put my mom and dad through hell. I think my dad was able to compartmentalize better than my mom. But my mom, man, hearing some of the stories that she's told me from her perspective. Remember I had mentioned the couple overdoses in the same week, Jupiter Hospital. Mm. There was one night that she told me about where she said, I ended up on their garage floor and she didn't want to bother the paramedics again. So she just sat with me with her hand on my chest, making sure that I was still breathing till morning. I mean, hearing stuff like that, because we don't realize the way that we hurt others. It's a big part of amends. My sponsor gave me a formula. Here's what I did to you. Here's what I'll try to do in the future. Did I leave anything out? And how do you want me to make it right? The did I leave anything out part, I don't think even to this day I'll be able to comprehend the ways that I've hurt people emotionally, mostly emotionally, some physically, or I mean, if that happened, I probably remember, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The damage that was done. All we can do is live in amends, man.
Well, Ben, I want to thank you for coming on, and I appreciate how vulnerable you got, and just to help someone else. It's truly a selfless act, and I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you having me.